Hey guys, welcome to AI with Supreet. I'm back with another video, and today we are going to do a to-do application with all the CRUD operations using natural language processing. So historically, as a standard, we have been doing to-do operations or CRUD operations basically with the help of some UI, wherein you click on the button to create a new object to retrieve and show it on the grid. All of that we will you can still do that, but with the help of AI. Now you can also do natural language, and you can say, hey, give me the list of my to-dos, or give me the list of skills based on student or whatever you want to query in your database. So essentially we are querying the database with natural language, and we are updating the database with the natural language. So this to do application basically gives you a sample of how to do that. Of course, you can apply it in real world applications as well. I have done it in a couple of real world applications as of now, and it was great. So there's this two ways you can apply natural language interactions with your database operations. One is to give a direct access to your database to the LLMs that you are working with. The problem that I find with that approach is that LLM does not know the entire schema of your database, and the only way it will know about the data structure that you are following is when you teach what is the data schema that you have, which is okay for small size databases, but it gets pretty complex, with a real world production apps. The other problem that I see with direct database, which is natural language to SQL approach, is that there is no authentication authorization layer. It's a little complex to build that layer when you are directly dealing with the database and natural language layer on top of it. Instead, if you have the APIs, then I think it's a better idea to deal with the existing APIs that you have. If you don't have the APIs, write the APIs on top of the database, and then use the natural language processing to call these APIs instead of dealing directly with the database. Working with APIs have a few benefits. One of the clearest benefits that I see is that most production apps have these APIs inbuilt, so it is very easy to do natural language processing on top of these existing APIs. Another thing is that because there are APIs, then the authentication authorization layer is already there. So you know that people who have access to the APIs are only capable of retrieving or updating the data, interacting with these APIs, because they have the authorization and authentication in place already done for that. So today what we are going to do is we are going to create a simple application wherein we'll do a create, retrieve, update, and delete with a to do object, and we'll do some APIs as well, and we will do a natural language processing based on top of these APIs to perform these actions with the database, not with the database directly, with the APIs, but yeah, I mean, to do these operations in an application. So what I've done is I've created a .NET 8 based console application, and we will quickly go ahead and start with the NuGet packages. So the very first NuGet that we will install is Semantic Kernel. So Semantic Kernel, and as of the recording of this video, I have 1.5.0. So I'll go ahead and install that. Then I also need planners.handlebar. Now, when you are using this, please make sure that you are including pre-release. As of today, as of March 8th, 2024, this is still in pre-release. So you'll have to check this box in order to use this. So install that. With that done, because we want to work with database, I want to use entity core. So I'll go ahead and install some of the NuGet packages related to entity core, and I don't mean to use pre-release here because these are solid, stable Microsoft ASP.NET Core, diagnostics, and entity framework core. Yes, I want that stable version. Install that, and then I am, because I do not want to do a database right now, I will create the objects in an in-memory database. So we will use Microsoft.entity framework core.in-memory for that, so that I don't have to deal with a database right now, but we can mimic a database which is in memory. So with that in place, I guess we will need two more. One is our all-time favorite, Newtonsoft.json, because we'll definitely be dealing with a lot of JSON in our application. So install that. And then finally, I may want to do a Schwarzbuckle ASP.NET Core as well. If you want to do, the Swagger, if you want to do the documentation of your APIs with Swagger, this is the NuGet package that we need for that. So with all those packages in place, yeah, it's all there. So now let's go ahead and start constructing our application. So the very first thing that we'll do is we'll add a folder called model. We'll add a folder called our controllers. This is where our to-do controller and AI controller will live. And I will have one more folder called services, and I'll talk about that a little later. Uh, Model controller services. Let's go ahead and add a to-do to this. So I already have an existing item. So let me just go ahead and grab it from here so that I can save some time. I don't have to redo it on the. So I'll go ahead and add a to-do object here and uh, change the namespace to CRUD with NLP. Instead of CRUD with NLP, I'll have to call it to-do with NLP. Okay, dot models. We have this to-do model class here with the three properties: ID, name, and is complete. As simple as it can get. Then I will go ahead and add a controller. So I'll just go ahead and add an existing item once again. And I have the controller here. It's called the to-do controller, and this is pretty basic. So if I'll give you a walkthrough of that, but before that, I will change this to, instead of CRUD with NLP, I will change this to do with NLP, and context we will just do in a while. So in fact, let's do that as well. So I'll go ahead and add a folder for context. This is where our DB context would live. So I'll go ahead and add that as well, and change this to do with NLP. With NLP.models. So context is pretty easy. I have a class here that is inheriting from DB context, and we have a DB set property called to dos. And this is essentially our collection where we will add the to dos and retrieve it from. So in the controllers, our route is controller slash action, and we have a to do controller that is using controller base, and we have the object of the context over here that we are getting from our dependency injection and updating it here. Then in here I've got a few methods. So this is a post method called create, where we are expecting a to do object as input, and then we are saving that in NLP context.todos.add, and we are just saving this as an object in the to-dos list that we have, which is in memory. But of course, in your case, it could be in the database as well. The get all method is a get method that gets the to-dos list as a to list async. Then we have an HTTP get method, wherein we call get all completed. So we only get the to-do items which are complete. Then we have a get one that finds one to do specific to the ID. Then we have an update wherein we update. This is an HTTP put method. So wherein we find a specific to do item with the ID, and then we update the name and this complete property of it, and then we save the changes. And then finally we have a HTTP delete with the help of an ID, wherein we go ahead and delete this. So it's a pretty straightforward solution. Let's go ahead and do some initial configuration here so that we can go ahead and start using this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of that here. Let's add, and I Forgot to add a configuration file, so I'll go ahead and add a configuration file as well. But we want to use in memory. So entity framework core. I'll add the kernel base. So for time being, just remove this from here. And yes, we want this. And I will remove this as well for time being. So let me just give you a walkthrough of what we are doing here. So in the program.cs, we are just creating a builder object, and then we are adding the controllers, endpoint explorer, swagger, because we want to use swagger here. So I've added swagger, add options. DB context is our NLP context that we have here. So in our context, we have the DB context here, so NLP context. So we are adding that DB context here, and then we are saying that we want to use in-memory database. So because in this demo application I do not have a proper database, so we are using an in-memory database called to-do list, and that is where the context is being used, and we are essentially saving all our to-do items and retrieving all of our to-do items from this to-do list over here. So I've updated that here, and then we just create a build. I'll talk about this and this configuration a little later when it comes to it. But then we are also using Swagger, and we are generating Swagger generated UI. So with that in place, let's do a quick build. Yeah, so it's all succeeded. So let's go ahead and try and run this and see if everything looks okay. All right, so one thing that I changed was to change the project's output from a console application to a web application. I forgot that we wanted to use Swagger, and for that we needed a web application. So I very quickly went ahead and went back and changed the SDK from Microsoft.NET SDK to SDK.web, and removed the output type exe from here, and that helps me convert this application to a console web application, not to a executable application. So with that in place, now let's go back and run this application, and I will remove these breakpoints here, and I'll just run this to show you that our to do is working. So we have it here, and in order to open Swagger, I will open slash swagger next to our URL, and we have it here. Now if I do a get all here, notice that you will get a 200, but you will not get any results in here because we don't have anything saved in the database. In fact, we don't have a database, we have an in-memory database. So every time you run this, you will have to create some items. So we'll go ahead and create a few items here. To do one is complete false, and execute. It gets created. I'll just go ahead and create a few more. 2, 3, and for 4 and 5 I will mark this as true. 4, 5, true. Yeah, now if I do a get all, you'll see that I get a list of 5 to do items, 3 of which are false and 2 of which are true. So if I call get all completed, I should get 4 and 5. Fair enough, I'm getting 4 and 5. So we have our basic to do application in place. Now let's go ahead. It is time to add our kernel memory to this. So what we are going to do now is, first we are going to create a configuration folder wherein we will read our key values from an app.json file, app.json file, instead of baking them directly into our code. So I'll go ahead and add a configurations file here. Oops, it's yeah, it's in this folder basically. So I'll just go ahead and copy this here, that file edit, and again, like all other files, go ahead and change the namespace from CRUD with with NLP. So now here we have a configuration file, and I will go ahead and add a configuration file as well, which has all my configs. So in my config file, I have these three values. Azure Open API is the section. Then I have a deployment name, endpoint, and the secret key. I will fill this in later. And once I have filled this in, I can go ahead and use this NLP configuration to read that configuration file. And in my program.cs, I can then add this configuration here. So I'll just open this and at that, now builder.services.configure of type NLP configuration, and we'll say get the section called Azure Open API. So this is nothing but, we are saying that this Azure Open AI section is where uh, our keys are. And if you see, this is the name of our section here as well. So with that in place, now we are reading the details from the key values from our app.json file. Now the next thing that we need to do is to go back to our services, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an existing interface, and that interface basically helps us to, in the services interface, I have this interface over here, and I have an implementation of that interface as well. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So let me just go back and add that as well. Go to services and add kernel base as well, both of them here. So I have created a kernel base interface here, and thanks to my friend Mohan for helping me with this implementation to do with NLP. I'll just go ahead and change the name for that as well. So it's all to do with NLP. And we do not have the plugins as of now, so I'll just remove this from here for time being. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But what we are doing with the interface here is that we created an interface called iKernel base, and this interface has just one method implementation definition called create kernel, and then we have a service here called kernel base, where we are implementing that interface. And in here we are saying that get the config. So we added the configuration files in our services here. We added a configuration file in our services here, so I can use dependency injection and get that services here in my kernel base constructor. And with that I can create an object of using semantic kernel. I can create a kernel dot create builder object. Then I can say add Azure OpenAI chat completion, and I will give it the deployment name, the endpoint, and the key that we are reading from our config file. And I'm just returning the build object from here. So, and then again, this is something that we will go ahead and add as a DI in our program.cs file here. Right, so we have the services added here as well. This way what will happen is that wherever we want to use this semantic kernel, we don't have to create new objects. This is something that we will just call this method basically, and this method will do the rest of the object creation, so we don't have to do it every time and again. So with that in place, let's go ahead and add these two plugins now. So I'll go ahead and add a plugins folder. So if you have been following along, then you know that plugins is where our existing skills reside. So we have to give it the plugins folder, and we'll go ahead, and I already have the plugins coded, so I'll just go ahead to my plugins, and I've got these two plugins here. So I'll go ahead and add these plugins. So I have a to-do plugin here. What does this to-do plugin does is basically it has a base URL, which in our case will change. So we'll change that, and then it has the methods called get all. So similar methods. It has a get to do's method. It has a get completed to do's method, do by ID, create new to do, and delete to do. So in the plugin we have defined these methods, and our LLM, our AI requires semantic kernel requires. Is able to identify these methods with the help of these descriptions. So please make sure that you annotate these methods as kernel function and then give it a proper description. So for example, in here I have a get to do's method, and I know that that method, what it does is it gets me all the list of to do items by calling the get all method. So this function, this description and annotating this with the kernel function is how our kernel identifies that okay, I have a plugin available that when called it gives me a list of all to do items. So this is important, and this description is extremely important. So please make sure that you do this correctly. Now rest of this method is pretty straightforward C sharp code, where we are just calling this URL with the, if any in parameters are there, we just pass that in, and then we get the contents, and then we convert that content into a list of to do's, and we return that to do's list. The same goes for get completed. In this case again we are just calling a different API. And if you have a parameters, for example, this one is get to do by ID. So in this case, not only do you need a description for the method, but also you need a description for each of the parameters as well. So in this case, the descriptions, the parameter description is the ID of the to do to fetch, right? Similarly, we have a create function here, create new to do. This guy expects a to do object. So in here, the description for the method is create a new to do item, and the description for the in parameter, which is a to do object, is the to do object to create a new to do task with. And similarly, I have one for update and one for delete as well. I will not go into the detail for all of them. This is self-sufficient to understand. Now, with that plugin in place, let's go ahead and write our controller. So I'll go ahead and add an existing controller, which is our AI controller. This is where, in this AI controller, is where we have our. So I'll have to change this again to do with NLP, and I'll go ahead and add that there. You don't need to do this. I had to do it because I'm copying the existing code from my previous solution. So I have a controller here again, using controller base. Again, in this controller base, I'm now getting the interface kernel base, a reference to that from my dependency injection. And in there, I have a method called NLP chat. This method basically accepts an input string. This is the post method. And in here, what I'm doing is using this interface implementation. I am creating a kernel object, and then I am setting up some arguments for the kernel. And this is very important. This particular setting here, OpenAI prompt execution setting, we are setting the tool call behavior to auto invoke kernel functions. What does this mean is that we are saying that the kernel can automatically identify which kernel function to call, right? And in our case, in our kernel base, we have this one plugin right now at from to do, and we have this one kernel function called. We have multiple kernel functions inside of this to do plugin. So if I go into this to do plugin, all of these are our kernel functions, right? Which kernel function does should this code should this kernel call at the time of invoking of this code is something that we are letting the kernel decide automatically by using this particular property. Okay, now with that in place, we just create a planner, and if you want, optionally you can say allow loops to be true. Then we are using the argument, the user's input that the user has given. We will talk about this. And we are adding that in the arguments, and then we are creating a plan. Now, plan can be created by this planner object, and then use the create plan async method on top of it. It expects two parameters. One is the kernel object that we created here, and the other is the input, which is the actual the goal of the planner. So the goal, what does it want to do? In our case, we will give the input as fetch me a list of all my to do items. So that is the goal. So what the planner will do is it will use the kernel and the goal to come up with a plan, and we will print that plan in the next line. And once we are happy with the plan, and I'm just printing it for the sake of brevity and debugging. But once I'm happy with the plan, what I'm doing is I'm saying that okay, execute this plan, and again use the same kernel object and create. So instead of new kernel arguments here, I can actually pass my arguments object that we created here, and that argument object should have. So instead of this doing that, what I can do is I can create the arguments here and have this OpenAI setting passed into this. Okay, so again, just to give you a walkthrough of the code, we have this AI controller that we have created, wherein we are getting a reference to our kernel base, which is our interface that we created. This one under the services, yeah, this one, yeah. And this guy has a method called create kernel, which we have implemented in this method called kernel base. So we have this method called create kernel that returns an object of kernel. In here we are using kernel.create builder. You don't have to do it here. You can, of course, I mean, I'm doing this for writing the code that is well managed. But if you don't want to do it all of here, you can simply go ahead and copy all of this code from here and put it instead of this particular line here, and that still works. So you don't have to go through those hoops. But I am just doing it for the making sure that my code is far more readable and maintainable. So I'm just creating this kernel object over here, and then I'm creating this OpenAI prompt execution setting, wherein we are saying that kernel can find the functions it needs to call automatically. Then we are passing that setting to execution setting to the arguments, and then we are also adding the input to the arguments. And then next we are creating a planner, and in the planner then we are saying that okay, this is the kernel object, and our goal is to whatever the user input is, which in our case is going to be give me a list of all my to do items. And then we are just asking it to give us a plan. And then in the next step we are invoking that same plan by again passing the kernel object and the arguments to it. And if everything is good, we are just returning the results. All right, so that is our overall method. So now let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So if I run this and if I go back to Swagger, this time I should have one more method for NLP chat. What is this? So instead of CRUD with NLP, I need to say to do with NLP.plugins and models. With that, again, some more places here as well. To do with NLP.models is used twice. I don't need that. It says so CRUD with NLP. Instead of that, we need to do to do with NLP, plugins and models, services and service interface. Where else? One more. So yeah, it's just duplicate, remove it from here. Okay. With that, let's go ahead and rebuild it. It all failed again. What was the error? Same error here, so we'll just replace that as well. Now I'll run this, and the application runs. There we go. This is our base URL. So if I go into my Swagger, now apart from the in the to-do controller I had all of this, but I also have this new controller called AI, and there is this method called NLP chat. This is what we'll use. So now I also need to go ahead and grab this URL and go and update this in my plugin. So my URL now is, instead of that, I have this 7083/22. I hope that is the correct URL. So let's go ahead and check it out once again. All right, let's go to Swagger and to do one false execute. It's got it there. Yeah, we have it under to do here, so that is correct. So our base URL is also correct here, and then base URL, and then we have get to do's. For get to do's, we have a get all method. So let's go ahead and check. That's the same here as well. We do have a get all method here. And if I try it out and execute, the method that is being called is https localhost 7083 to do get all. Make sure it's all the same. Localhost 7083 to do and get all. Okay, everything looks good. So now we'll just rerun this application because we changed the base URL and see what happens. And I will put a breakpoint here in our NLP chat method. Okay, all right. With that in place, let's go ahead and create some sample to-do items. Remember that we are using in-memory database. So we will need to go ahead and create to-do items every time we run it. You don't need to do it if you are using a proper database, which I am not. So I'll need to go ahead and create these items. Okay, well, just go ahead and let's create a few more. Exclude is false as well. We'll make the fourth one as true and the fifth one as true as well, because we have a different method for getting completed items. Okay, now let's do a get all. Normal API call to make sure that all our to do items are there. We have 3 false items and 2 true items. Okay, that's all good. Now let's go ahead and execute this one. Remember, what is this? This is our NLP chat option, wherein we are saying that, hey, give me a list of all my to-dos and see what happens. So I execute that, it comes here. Our input is give me a list of all my to-dos. Next, we create an object of the kernel, semantic kernel object that gets created, or it fails. What happens? I don't know if it fails. So let's do something here. In fact, let's go there to the kernel base and do a try catch here. Put all of these code. Try and see if we get an exception there. So we'll just put a method there as well, a breakpoint there as well. Okay, all right. I'll have to add some to-do items once again, which is a pain, but we don't have a choice. So let's go ahead and do that again. Quickly create some to-do items. Right, so let's go ahead and run this. Give me a list of all my to-dos. Execute. Goes to our NLP chat method. Let's see if we are able to create. Oh, yeah. So the one thing that I forgot is not giving any values here. So I'm going to go ahead and update. These values are missing. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly update it, for which I'm going to blur my screen and update these values. Name. Okay. With that in place, let's go ahead and run this again. Go ahead and create a few to-do items, and this time I'm going to go ahead and create only one item to test. Item 1 false. Execute. Works. Let's go ahead and try this one out. Get me list of all my to-dos and execute that. It creates a kernel object. Does that. Then we go ahead and create a setting, pass the setting to the arguments, we create a planner, we give the input, which is our goal, as the argument to the arguments of the kernel. Then we create a plan using planner.createPlan async method. So planner.createPlan async, we give it the kernel and the input. Now our original plan is created. Let's go ahead and print what the plan is, and we'll see what the plan that it has created is. It says that extract the key values, in our case set to dos. So it now knows that it needs to call a plugin call in the to dos to do plugins. There's a method called get to dos, and it needs to call that. And then step one is to print the to do list. So it will just get the JSON object and it will just print it. So the plan looks good. So now if I execute on that, I get the result, and I can execute that, and you see it gives me a to do object here. Let's also go ahead, remove all other breakpoints, in fact. So I'll have just one breakpoint here. Remove, in fact, remove all of them first. Then have one here and one on the to do plugins get to do's method here. Okay. And then let's go ahead and create a few minutes. In fact, let's go ahead and add one more breakpoint at get by item and get completed as well. Okay, and now let's go ahead and create a few more to do items. So two is false, three is false, 4 is true, and 5 is also true. Okay, now if I go ahead and again ask it to get me show me my pending work. Let's see what does it do with that. So rather than using to-dos as the word, I'm saying that show me my pending work. And what is the plan that it has created? it has created and printed the plan. So let's go ahead and take a look. It is saying that choose the right helpers. And yes, it is going to call to do plugin.get to do's. It is automatically able to figure out which plugin and which method inside of that plugin needs to get called based on our setting that we gave here, wherein we said automatically invoke the kernel functions, right? So it is able to identify the plugin and get to do's with that. And same pending to do's, but yeah, I mean, let's see what it does. And if I do an F5, let's see if it goes to get to do's. Yeah, it does go to the get to do method, and it does the call there, the normal C sharp code to get the to do's from the list, returns a list, and then hopefully it just prints them. So you see, it got all one, two, three, four, five, all of them. But if I go ahead and if I say, show me all my completed to do's, and then execute it. Let's see whether it calls a different method this time. So now it says which method it needs to call in the plan. It says call to do plugin and the one that has get the completed to do. So again, it was able to do that. If I do an F5, it calls which one get to do's, which it did not need to do, but yeah, it also called the ones which are completed 4 and 5, right? uh can I do something, show me all my pending tasks? Now remember, I do not have a method for this, but can it call my to do's and do a reverse apply false on that to see whether it is able to do that? What is the plan that it has come up with? Plan is that number one, get all to do's, then filter incomplete to do's by pending items. Let's see what it does. So get all to do's. Okay, fantastic. And then yeah, no, it won't be able to do that because we don't have a method for that. Okay. All right. Now, if I call a method called or create a task to remind me to walk my dog. Now, this is interesting because it is going to call the create method. And let's see what the plan it creates. The plan that it has created is that extract the key values. In this case, task description is remember to walk the dog, and due date is tomorrow at 7 p.m. That it automatically hallucinated basically. So now it has a method called to do plugin and create new to do. So it's going to call that. So I'm going to go to my to do plugin and create new to do method and put a breakpoint there. Create new to do method, put a breakpoint there, and just one F5. And what does it do? It won't work because it is hallucinating a few helpers. It hallucinated a helper called hash, which we don't have, right? So it won't do that. Okay, so fix this. What we will do is we'll go ahead and create one more plugin that will allow it to figure out which object we need to work with. And in this case, our object is this. The new plugin that we have is called identify to do object plugin. So we have a new plugin here called identify to do object, in which plugin I have got three different methods. One is identify to do task. The job of this is to get the user input from here, and from this input figure out the task from it. Then I have one more called identify the to do status. So the job of this method is to identify the status from the given input, and detects the status of the task to be done from the user input. The um, values are true or false, right? The return values are either true or false. And then I have um, one more method called create to do object. What it does basically, it expects the name and status and uses that to create a to do object, and then returns a to do object. But I have very clearly mentioned that this creates a to do object from the given inputs, the to-do object created must be passed to appropriate methods to save them in the database. So I have very clearly mentioned that this to-do object that it gets created, it's only in memory. It does not save that in the database. We need a different method to do that, right? So I have this new plugin now. Now I'll go back to my kernel base here, and I will add this plugin as well to my kernel object. So now it has two things to work with. Not only the to do plugin, the original APIs, but it also has an identify to do object plugin. And to summarize, what we are doing here is we have three methods. One is to identify the task from the given input, then identify the status, whether it is true or false, it is done or not done, complete or incomplete from there, from the given input, and then it creates. So these two are LLM methods. So in here, we are using AI's power to go ahead and figure out the actual task and figure out the actual status. But this is a normal C sharp method where we are then passing the normal name and status to create a to do object out of it and return that to do object. Why are we doing this? Because when I am calling this to do plugins create to do method here, I need the to do object. So we are just giving it one more plugin so that it can identify the task, identify the status, and create a to do object out of it. Okay, so I'm just giving it a few more plugins, and let's do breakpointing these as well to see which one gets called at what time and how the planner uses these additional skills that we have provided it with. Okay, so now let's go ahead, and I'll have to, no other choice, I can seed it though, but okay, it does not take a long time to go ahead and create these to do objects right now. So let's go ahead and create them. To do item 1 false, created. 2 false, execute, created. 3 false, execute, created. I'll create a fourth one for which we'll set the status to be true. Gets created. And I'll do a fifth one and set to true, and it's get created. Now go ahead and do our original queries once again, just in case, to check. Get me my tasks. To that, goes to NLP chat, creates a plan. Let's go and see what the plan is. It says that plan 0 is to call to do plugin.get to do's, and then second step is to just return it. So it's good. Go ahead, call to do plugin.get to do's, automatically figures that out, returns the method, and gives me a list of all my 5 items here. Okay, now here I'll say remind me to walk the dog. Execute. Let's see what it does now. So what is the plan that it has come up with this? Now it says that step 1, call the custom helper to get the task. So, oh sorry, this one is the new one here. So it says extract the key values. So the task is to walk the dog, and then call example helper to display reminder. So example helper input concat don't forget to task. Now it is again hallucinating. It is using some example helper which we do not have. So this won't work. It will in fact result in a hallucination error. Okay, now okay, let's change the word a little. I'll say add uh, to do to remind me to walk the dog. So just change that a little and see what happens. Okay, creates a new plan again. And the plan that it has created is says extract the key values. So the new task name is walk the dog, and set the new task from here. Identify new. So now it is using the new plugin, identify to do object plugin, and creates a to do object out of it. So name is it's passing that as the new task name, which is for the dog, and setting it as false because we said if you cannot determine whether the task is done or not, mark it as false. So it is doing that. Then it is passing that to do new plugin or create new to do, and it is doing all of that automatically. So now let's go ahead run it. So you see, first it is coming to is this method called create new to do object, and the task is walk the dog. Status is incomplete. Gets a to do object out of it, and then calls our create new to do method with our to do object to go ahead and create this new to do, and says new task got added. Now if I go ahead and get me a list of all my to-dos and run that, instead of 5 I should have 6 with the walk the dog method added as well, task added as well. Where is it? Oh, it was not able to do that. Let's run again. Run it again. Yes, and you see, walk the dog is there. So not only are we able to retrieve the existing items, we are also able to create new items. Now I can say, give me the task with ID 5, 6 in fact. Let's see what it does. Fair enough. It calls the one wherein we are getting get to do by ID, gets the JSON object, and returns us walk the dog. Right? Similarly, I can go ahead and say update the task with ID 6 as done. Let's see what it does now. It has created a plan. Whether it will work or not, let's see. So it says get to do by ID. So it gets it basically identified to do object. So it calls get to do by ID. I don't know. We don't have this method. Do we have it? No. Then identify create a to do object. Then to do plugin. Create new to do. Delete the old task. Print a new task. So it's not doing that properly. But let's go ahead and run it and see what it does basically. Yeah, it will fail with the hallucination method because it is expecting a method in our identify to do object with get to do by ID, which we do not have. So let's go ahead and run this again with a slightly different user input. We'll say update the existing task with ID 6, mark it as complete. Let's see that. So let's go ahead and see what it does. Step 1, it gets to do item by get to do by ID. Okay, that's correct. To do item dot is complete is equal to correct. Result, create new to do item is that is correct. Why is it creating a new item though? So get to do item by ID, getting that object. Some error. No. So updates case is something that I'll have to. Oh, in fact, I know why it is not working. I think it is not working because in my to do plugin, I have not yet. See, this method is not yet implemented. That is why it's not working. So if I go ahead and update this method, I'm pretty sure that it will start picking this up as well. Nonetheless, you were able to see how to not only get objects or get the data, call your APIs or interact get the items from your database using the APIs via NLP, but also create new objects. And the key to creating new objects is to give it one more plugin wherein you help it create the object you want to pass to your creating method, to create object method that you have. In case of here, we needed a to-do object, so we created one more plugin that basically gets the key values and creates the to-do object, returns it to be passed to this method called create new to-do here. And if you do that, the in most cases it is able to perform the correct operations. So this code is in GitHub. I hope this helps. You will find this in GitHub with the name of CRUD with NLP. It's already there in my GitHub. I will leave a link below in this comments. I hope this helps. Thank you.